Chris Robertshaw is with us, so we're talking still about the Dr Ranson tribunal, and you've always had a really harsh word for the AGs, haven't you, on this? I mean,
yes, I have. Well, I mean, it was part of the reason why I wanted the Tynwald process to become much more aware of its responsibilities in relation to the justice system, and they're very specific. They're limited, but very specific. And part of that whole process is that the AG's department is worthy of trust and enjoys the right to stand stating itself to be a Crown appointment. It's not worthy of that at the present time.
But how do you fix it?
Well, the Constitutional Legal and Justice Committee looked at the role of the AG's department, which it's a far too big an organisation. It has far too many responsibilities. It is the only point of advice, as I've discussed with you before, for the parliamentary process.
Yeah, so should they be removed from sitting there?
They should be removed from
Tynwald.
Tynwald, absolutely. The prosecution service should come out of that. That's agreed, but it still hasn't happened for some reason. And also, politicians need a second opinion from somewhere else. And I tried to fix that years ago when myself and a limited number of other members pushed very hard to have a Solicitor General who would have a different role to the AG, who would be completely separate to the AG, and give shall we say, a separate and independent opinion to particularly Tynwald and, if necessary, the department, so that there was an understanding that, you know, the old phrase, there are as many opinions as there are lawyers. The Isle of Man is limited to one opinion right across the board, and that has created this, what I would call a complacent arrogance. And this matter must be addressed. Now, the Constitutional Legal and Justice Committee should pick this up again. It needs to be looked at more carefully, and I hope as a result of the Dr Ranson affair that once and for all people begin to appreciate that there's a job to be done here.
You said arrogancy there about AGs, and me being a complete layperson sitting through most, and not all, but the stuff I saw, especially the early on stuff, it seemed that I think maybe some members of certain departments felt they were bomb-proof and they didn't have to play by the rules. They could do what they wanted to some degree because no one was there to pick up on it until, of course, they were found out. They were caught with their pants down. Let's face it. I mean, you know.
Well, yes, and when you're not accountable, and the AGs is not accountable to, who's it accountable to? Frankly, nobody. There's no real oversight. Tynwald historically hasn't sat in oversight of the AG's department in the way it should, saying, is it functioning the way it should? And I think that's why the Wooler report was produced and then lost conveniently. It's interesting that the Wooler report review that was running last year, as I understood it, was supposed to produce its opinion, if you like, by about September, October. We're now in April of the following year. We still haven't heard from it, and one wonders why. And why doesn't Tynwald deal with the AGs? Well, because I think, frankly, a lot of members have been in awe of the AG's department. And I've said to you before that members sit there almost in awe of what's called the learned attorney speaking ex cathedra. This has got to stop. And I hope that some members start to understand and appreciate that they have a duty to the electorate to make sure that the electorate can again learn to trust the AGs, which it does not do at the moment.
How many times have you said it? This plays out so badly, you know, people watching this and people wanting to get into the health service over here. Some definitely would have second thoughts if they hear what's gone on in the past and what has happened to this particular person that this whole thing is revolving around to sort out recompense for her.
Well, it depends on how the establishment in all its component parts reacts in the end once the tribunal is over in a healthy and positive way. If it just tries to brush it away and say, oh, well, that was a one-off. It wasn't a one-off at all. What the tribunal is dealing with is a situation that blew up out of a crisis, out of the COVID crisis. It wasn't in isolation. It was the system being put under incredible stress and exhibiting long-held weaknesses that were inherent in the structure and behaviour and culture of government. So it wasn't an accident that occurred in COVID. It became obvious in COVID that there was something that needed to be fixed. And my goodness me, they need to fix it.
Okay, well...
Can we go on to the Expo report?
Yeah, I was going to... Yeah, I've got this thing about this FOI as well I want to get in, because at the time of recording we've only got like a day until they're meant to give a response, but of course it may be out there by the time this gets out.
Okay, well, come back to that.
Yeah.
The Expo came back again. Now
it came up again on Friday.
Yes.
Oh right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, in the closing remarks from Casey Siegel, that's the claimant's advocacy. The Casey Siegel put a solid case forward as to why the £68,000 Expo report was flawed, and actually that hit home with the tribunal, and the tribunal then said, and I think this is important, said, well, hang on a second here, do we need to have yet a further tribunal hearing on this subject? In other words, what was clear...
That would be interesting.
Now, what that clearly indicated was there's still great uncertainty about the veracity and judgment of the Expo report that needed further consideration. And the chairman of the tribunal asked both parties, would you be willing to enter into a further hearing? Wow. Both parties said no. Oh. And the reason I believe that was the case was that I think Dr Ranson has been put through enough, and it's time to call it a day. And
it's been very emotionally draining on it, hasn't it?
I support that. But the point is, and I think a phrase that the tribunal chairman used when Casey Siegel had stopped talking on this particular element, the Expo report, he said, and I think it was an interesting phrase, I'm paraphrasing this, I think, but it's fairly accurate. He said to the hearing, he said, well, both parties have been kicking this ball backwards and forwards between them on the Expo report. Mm-hmm. And he said, it seems to me that the claimant, Siegel, Dr Ranson's side, has scored a goal here. So enough of this concept about nothing to see here. A £68,000 misplaced investigation.
It's credibility, isn't it? A credibility issue on what was placed there in front of them. Maybe knowing who was paying the piper and all the things that go behind the scenes. You know how these things work. I'm not saying nothing. I'm not for a minute saying anything untoward happened with that report. You know, that report is obviously justified, and their conclusions were made. But it's a credibility that is always going to be lacking, isn't it?
But back to my earlier statement about the AG's fingers are on everything. Now, do you think for one second that the Expo report would have happened without the AG's approval? And remember, and this is the thing I'm really jaundiced and frankly angry about, and that is Expo were wheeled in immediately after the events at Abbotswood that went on for a year. And listen to this, resulted in a number of attempts at suicide. Now, let's stop and think about that. We're hearing the members on the floor of Tynwald wax lyrical about what we should or shouldn't be doing, about our suicide policies. And yet here I'm pointing at a situation where if the AGs approved the Expo investigation wrongly into Abbotswood at the time that they did, are the AG's department actually, in a thoughtless and clumsy way, partly responsible for the attempted suicide? So I think government needs to bring these things a lot more closely to home than they actually have done. Yep. And then it was the AG's department also, having imposed the Expo report through the department, and the department would not have done it without the AG's approval, they then put this ridiculous sub judice issue on it.
Well,
now, how badly can an organisation behave?
As the journalist side of things, it was always Expo and it's going to be sub judice and don't go there, don't touch it.
Yeah.
And yet there was nothing.
Because the AGs thought that they could get away with this sort of behaviour because they've been doing it for some time. And again, sorry to get a little bit strong here, but as an MHK, I innumerably came across situations where people who had worked for government or were working for were badly treated because, as you said earlier, the departments always had this singularity of legal support and a sum of taxpayers' money to apply to this when the person in receipt of this treatment had no such recourse. There has got to be changes in the AG's department, and if Tynwald don't start acting, then shame on them.
Can I borrow your glasses? Okay. Can I do my thing?
Yeah.
Because this is they're very strong. My FOI request. One's already been refused, that was DHSE, but this one, and I said it could be changing, so look at the small print because it might have come back by the time we actually broadcast this. My FOI request to the Cabinet Office, please disclose all and any communications, emails, messages, meetings, notes and or phone calls involving the Chief Minister and or the Cabinet Office with any officers within DHSC between the 19th of October 2022 and the 5th of October 2022 regarding the DHSC's second appeal against the orders made by the EET and the Ranson v DHSC case. DHSC second appeal was subsequently heard in the High Court on the 6th of October and dismissed. So, of course, this is down to who said yes to that second appeal, and it's really important this, because if there's fingerprints are not in the right order, in the right places, and the right people who have done it, which is potentially what I'm hearing, but I cannot confirm, therefore it's only a rumour, so you shouldn't listen to them, I know, but I do like to feel that something might be interesting that comes out of that, because basically the Chief Minister shouldn't, or his officers shouldn't have actually been approving any of that. Well, it should go to DHSC, and the Minister should have signed off on it. That's the point. There's a fog at the minute over that.
That's the point. The Minister, Rob Collister,
I believe.
Yeah, I believe. The Minister of the department should have signed it off, and I think the public are entitled to know whether he did or he didn't.
So I'm hearing it's something like 4:30 at night. Had to be done by 5. Pressure is on. A digital signature was attached to the order. Again, I'm just joining dots here, so please do not take this as fact. This is just potentially what I'm hearing, and therefore, obviously, there's a sort of paper trail backwards now to find out who put their signature on that order to say go ahead and have a second appeal, which we didn't need, did we? Really? I mean, you're just trying to slow things down yet again.
Well, they have to respond, and I think perhaps it's worth a chat when that FOI actually comes out. If I can go on to costs.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
If I can go on to costs. The costs of this are just absolutely enormous. We keep talking about Expo 68,000, but the costs, the 2 appeals, what has that cost?
Do we know?
I don't know yet, but the tribunal itself, running costs must be enormous. The 2 appeals to the High Court must be significant. The employment of KCs on both sides, absolutely enormous. And when, in fact, if everybody had been sensible at the outset of all of this, the matter could have been brought to a closure at no cost to the taxpayer. The taxpayer has been paying for all of this nonsense.
And no one's been sacked. I keep saying no one's been sacked. Everyone's gone into the sunset.
A lot of people have been removed.
That's not the same as being sacked or losing their pension rights or whatever like that, is it? I mean,
now, there's a few final matters that come out. Other matters. Who employed Magson?
We still don't know, right?
I think we do. I think it was the Public Service Commission.
Okay, because someone's pot it came out of, right? I mean, at the end of the day, someone's check went to that person.
No,
am I being stupid?
Catherine Magson was employed. I'm pretty sure now, right? I hope I'm right, and if I'm not, I'm perfectly happy to be corrected.
Yeah.
But it was the Public Service Commission that employed her. Now, I think this is interesting. Would Catherine Magson have been employed without the say-so of Sir Jonathan Michaels? And my instinct is, well, no. So what we have is a situation where Sir Jonathan Michaels has indicated or supported or enthused about Catherine Magson's employment. Later on, when Catherine Magson treats Rosalind Ranson appallingly, Rosalind Ranson's trying to do an excellent job, she goes to Sir Jonathan Michaels and says, look, this is what's going on. And he said, well, there's nothing you can do, just accept it. Or words to that similar to that effect. I would put this down, in my humble opinion, to Sir Jonathan Michaels' major failure. And it's about time he started being answerable for his behaviour. He's still sitting there. And I think that one of the policy review committees in Tynwald should call him in and get him to start explaining his conduct as he spends through the agencies, etc., because that's the way it's building. He starts explaining his conduct. What else have we got? The strange.
Oh no, though it's still strange, is it not, that no one in the Isle of Man government seems to know who employed her, and where she was drawing her cash from. Didn't that seem?
Well, I think
in that tribunal they didn't know. They kept saying no one seemed to know.
Well, no, if she was on secondment from somewhere in Hertfordshire or wherever it was, a trust, she would have presumably been paid from them, and the government would have paid the trust in the UK. But it brings me on to this strange secondment of our own medical director, who's disappeared over the horizon.
Which I tweeted a few weeks ago.
And that makes you think, well, hang on a second. If he truly has been seconded, then presumably we're still paying him. Are we not?
I don't know.
Well, can the Isle of Man Health Service second people to the UK? Who pays for them? And coming back to those issues that we faced earlier on in all of this, if he conducts himself as in the UK as employed by the Isle of Man government, is he answerable to the UK judiciary or ours? And there's a lot of huge grey areas. So finally, what happens next?
What happens next, Chris?
Yeah. So what happens is
we wait, don't we?
We wait, because the tribunal must deliberate on all that they've heard in terms of what the remedy should be in all its component parts. And then they have to have that submitted for consideration by, I think it's PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, I think it's them. If not, it's one of the other big accountancy companies, and Boyle & Co., who look at, I think it's the pension side. So we've got to wait for that. I don't see, even at that stage, that's an end to it, because Tynwald now has an absolute duty to pick all this up and examine it and see what can be done, not just deal with what looks to some people incorrectly as a one-off, but the fundamental underlying culture that was exposed during the COVID crisis, and so brilliantly exposed by Rosalind Ranson.
Okay. Well, it's been interesting, and there's more to this, and you must take this is our opinions.
Yes.
We're not the lawmakers, we don't have that ability to know what's going on behind the scenes, but this will play out, and it will keep playing out until this finally is put to bed. But what, and I suppose we should do this in our final thing, what a mess. Let's put it like that. Just what an absolute mess of how not to handle things, and how this makes the Isle of Man look internationally. I just dread to think.
The duty now falls with the executive in the form of the Council of Ministers, and falls to Tynwald to resolve these issues. But in doing so, they absolutely must focus on the AG's department, refresh it, make it good, and make it worthy of being a Crown appointment.